There was a time when the term Eurosclerosis was very much in vogue. It seems to have gone out of fashion in recent times. But I think certainly the pace with which the European institutions have responded to the crisis, not just in this state, but across the Union, has been marked by a sclerotic pace. And not alone that, having been slow to react, then the nature of the reaction and the intervention is not only questionable, but in our view, very destructive. I want to focus most of my remarks on the Pact for the Euro, which will be presented to the Council meeting. And as we know, the objectives set out for that pact are to foster competitiveness, to foster employment, to contribute further to the sustainability of public finances, and to reinforce financial stability. The great difficulty, of course, for the pact is that it runs headlong into its own contradictions. Because in order to achieve any of those objectives, what we need is investment for faster growth. We need an equal path towards effective competitive rebalancing. We need urgent measures to get deficit countries out of the straitjacket they find themselves in. And we need measures to clean up the banks. And the pact, as it stands, is a million miles away from any such plan. And it fails to set out any kind of roadmap to achieve its own stated goals. Not alone that, but concurrent with this pact, the ECB steps forward to announce that it will raise interest rates. This, of course, runs precisely counter to each of the stated aims of the pact. Fiscal consolidation will be made harder because of higher interest rates and slower nominal GDP growth. The appreciation of the euro will harm external competitiveness. The impact on the deficit countries will be far more severe on the surplus countries like Germany, worsening the current imbalance problem. And growth and employment will be lower than would otherwise be the case. And I suppose this is no great surprise, because there is at the heart of the EU austerity strategy itself a fundamental flaw. The more countries reduce wages, the heavier their inherited debt loads become. And as the debt burdens become heavier, public spending must be cut further and taxes increased to service the government's debt and that of its wards, like the banks. This in turn creates the need for more internal devaluation, further heightening the debt burden, and so on. And so then we are in a vicious spiral downward into economic depression. Indeed, the two main policy planks of the Pact for the Euro, namely rapid and permanent fiscal consolidation, as well as further wage cuts, can only lead us to the conclusion that what we have here is not so much a pact for the euro, so much as a pact for austerity. And this does not bode well for the future of the European economy. The proposed pact aims to enshrine the austerity remedies supposedly prescribed by the financial markets. And while fiscal discipline and fiscal balance are positive things and desirable things in the medium and long term, it is an offence against democracy to elevate them to the preeminent points of principle. And I have to say, I hear with worry the Taoiseach's assertion that he will give this principle the strongest underpinning in legal base. I wonder, does that mean a constitutional underpinning? I think the Taoiseach might make that clear.
Is it a...
Pardon me?
Which issue are you talking about there?
I'm talking about the fiscal discipline. Your statement earlier said...
No, I'm not talking about constitutional base, I'm talking about legislative base.
Legislative base. Well, that wasn't clear. You said the strongest legal underpinning, so I wanted to clarify that. Nonetheless,
legislative.
Even to elevate it in that way is an incredibly dangerous thing to do, for the following reason. You elevate to a point of principle fiscal discipline and fiscal shrinkage, which will have immediate impacts in terms of public service provision. There has to be balance, there has to be discipline, but there also has to be a very keen eye to the provision of public services and the quality of life of citizens. And the difficulty with pursuing that kind of legal underpinning, which is much beloved of the Germans and other EU administrations, is that it relegates public service and quality of service and the well-being of citizens into a very clear second position.
It's about reckless spending. That's what it's about.
Well, there's nobody in this House, I'm sure, Taoiseach, I'm not so sure, who commends reckless spending. But there's a way of dealing with this in a manner that does not cut the legs from under services which are already struggling, and which still understands that in primary position in this state is the citizen and the welfare of the citizen, and not economic dogma and doctrine. Can I finish my speech?
Protect the citizen as the primary person.
Certainly, but you have to prove the case and make the case for the kind of legal underpinning that you were suggesting for the so-called fiscal discipline. Because for
2 minutes left.
Thank you. I hope I'll get those 2 minutes. For the purposes of citizens in this state, very often terms that are used like fiscal discipline actually translate in real life to cutbacks and hardship and people being stuck, as my colleague Padraig McLaughlin has said, in terms of meeting basic household bills. So let me move on and try and wind up on this. There's a further contradiction and dilemma for the strategy as proposed at an EU level, and let me put it this way. How can the reputation of a financial area be made more solid by rewarding bank failure and not bank success? And how can we trust the EU to police our national budgets to ensure economic growth and recovery as they bail out European banks at the expense of the welfare of European citizens for generations to come? How is it that the European Commission's deliberations on burden sharing, for example, are an exercise in futuring? Why is it that they adopt this not yet policy? A policy that not alone won't work, but a policy that will potentially bring about economic apocalypse in the peripheral countries, as they're called, such as Greece and Ireland. How is it that at a European level the term economic governance reform can be used to sugarcoat a really vicious agenda that's about shrinking the public sector, slashing the welfare state, and at the same time protecting bondholders? And I will finish on this. Please indulge me. There is a danger that European policy makers will actually believe their own propaganda. They will actually believe that this pact constitutes a resolution of the euro area crisis. It does nothing of the sort. And if anything, it will exacerbate matters. Merkel and Sarkozy may fan, in fact, the flames of the euro crisis. And of course, for our purposes, the bigger danger, again, is that our government and An Taoiseach would buy into that self-same propaganda to the detriment and damage of this state and our citizens.
Thank you, Deputy. Can I call on